The following is a DW Ancient Egypt production. In the last episode, we discussed the final kings of the New Kingdom. During the reign of Ramesses XI, the priests of Amun at Thebes broke away and began their own rule of Egypt, thus splitting the country in half. This began the Third Intermediate Period. The topics of this episode include the High Priest of Amun, Herihor, the High Priest of Amun, Pinedjem, the Story of Wenamun, the 21st Dynasty, the 22nd Dynasty, and the 23rd and 24th Dynasties. The steadily increasing power of the priesthood of Amun at Thebes had fully developed under Ramesses XI. Homer spoke of the wealth of Thebes in the Iliad, Book 9. In Egyptian Thebes, the heaps of precious ingots gleam, the 100-gated Thebes. The Amun priesthood owned 2/3 of all temple land in Egypt, 90% of all ships, and 80% of all factories. Their grip on the state's economy was paramount. It was therefore merely a short step for Herihor, the high priest of Thebes, to enforce his supremacy over the last of the Ramessides and create a ruling class, taking power from the Pharaohs. During the reign of King Ramesses XI, from 1107 to 1077 BC, the priests of Amun at Thebes exerted their power and established a new dynasty, breaking away from the north. Herihor, who was originally an Egyptian army officer, had advanced through the ranks of the military during the reign of Ramesses XI. His wife, Nochemet, may have been Ramesses XI's daughter. He served several years under the king, but assumed more and more titles. When Ramesses XI died, Herihor, due to his positions of High Priest of Amun and Viceroy of Kush, ultimately became the de facto ruler of Upper Egypt and Nubia. At this time, Herihor assumed royal status and openly adopted royal titulary, ruling Thebes for 6 years, from 1076 to 1070 BC. His major building projects involved the Temple of Khonsu on the south side of the temple complex of Amun, where he built the forecourt and the pylons. Meanwhile, Mendes I had buried Ramesses XI and thus legitimately inherited the throne, inaugurating the 21st dynasty from his hometown Tanis, even if he did not control Upper Egypt and Nubia, which were now effectively in the hands of Herihor and his successor priests, ruling from Thebes. Herihor was most likely succeeded by Pinedjem in 1070 BC, who inherited a political and religious base of power at Thebes. With this, he strengthened his control over both Middle and Upper Egypt and asserted his kingdom's virtual independence from the 21st dynasty, which had now been fully moved to Tanis in the Delta region. He married Hanutwe, a daughter of Ramesses XI. Their son, Susanes I, went on to become pharaoh at Tanis, thereby removing the gap between the two families. In practice, however, the 21st dynasty kings and the Theban kings were probably never very far apart politically, since they respected each other's political autonomy. Pinedjem's mummy and a large number of his blue faience Ushabti figures were found in the royal cache at Deir el-Bahari. He apparently had intentions of taking over the unfinished tomb of Ramesses XI, but never did so. Where he was buried originally remains unknown. The details of the remaining high priests at Thebes becomes vague and somewhat debated. Like the previous intermediate periods, the history is poorly documented. Pinedjem II carried out another inspection on the valley and found that all the burials had been robbed. He declared the valley could no longer be protected and moved the mummies for safety to a secret cliff tomb, which he chose as his own. This cache of mummies, now called the Deir el-Bahari cache, would remain safe until their discovery in the late 1800s. The Story of Wenamun sheds some light on this poorly recorded period, although whether it's historical fiction is debated. As the story begins, the principal character, Wenamun, is sent by Herihor to the Phoenician city of Byblos. Wenamun is a priest of Amun at Karnak and is tasked with acquiring giant cedar logs to build a new ship to transport the cult image of Amun. He is robbed while traveling to Byblos, and upon arrival is shocked by the hostile reception he receives. When he finally gains an audience with the local king of Byblos, Zakar Baal, the king requires he pay first, which conflicts with the original custom. Wenamun has to send for money, a humiliating move which reveals Egypt's waning power over the eastern Mediterranean. After a wait of almost a year at Byblos, Wenamun attempts to leave for Egypt only to be blown off course to Cyprus, where he was almost killed by an angry mob before placing himself under the protection of the local queen, whom he called Hatbi. At this point, the story breaks off. The story of Wenamun is one of the most vivid and descriptive narratives of pre-classical times. The 21st dynasty began with Smendes, who proclaimed himself king after the death of Ramesses XI. He ruled from 1077 to 1051 BC and was the pharaoh who moved the capital from Paramses to Tanis, which was largely rebuilt using stones from Paramses. Smendes ruled over a divided Egypt and only effectively controlled Lower Egypt during his reign, while Middle and Upper Egypt was effectively under the control of the high priests of Amun. No trace has yet been found of the tomb of Smendes. The sole funerary object linked to him is a canopic jar of his that once contained his liver, but this hypothesis is unproven. Smendes was succeeded briefly by Amenemnesu, a son of Herihor. Amenemnesu's existence was only confirmed in 1940 when his gold bow cap was discovered within the Tanite tomb of his successor, Susanes I. Although his reign is obscure, he is thought to have ruled for 4 years, from 1051 to 1047 BC. He would be succeeded by Susanes I. During his long reign, Susanes built the enclosure walls and the central part of the Great Temple at Tanis, which was dedicated to the triad of Amun, Mut, and Khonsu. Many of these blocks were salvaged from the derelict city of Paramses and kept the name of Ramesses II. Obelisks still bearing the name of Ramesses II were transported from the former capital at this time. Professor Pierre Montet discovered Pharaoh Susanes I's tomb in Tanis in 1940. This was Egypt's first intact royal tomb to ever be found. Remember that Tutankhamun's tomb had been robbed twice in antiquity before being resealed. Had these treasures not been found during World War II and published only in French, public fascination would have been enormous. Due to its moist Lower Egypt location, most of the perishable wood objects in this tomb were destroyed by water, a fate not shared by KV-62, the tomb of Tutankhamun, in the drier climate of Upper Egypt. In the burial chamber, a large red granite sarcophagus enclosed a black granite coffin, which in turn contained the mummy in a silver inner coffin. Dr. Douglas Dury, who worked as the head of Cairo University's Autonomy Department, examined the king's remains in 1940 and determined that the king was an old man when he died. Dury noted that Susanes I's teeth were badly worn and full of cavities. He had an abscess that left a hole in his palate and suffered from extensive arthritis. The king was probably crippled by this condition in his final years. Over the face of the mummy lay a gold face mask. The large red granite sarcophagus had originally been used 170 years earlier for the burial of Merneptah. The black granite coffin had belonged to a high-ranking 19th dynasty noble. The silver inner coffin was 3 times more valuable than that of King Tutankhamun's. Silver was more valuable than gold in Egypt, about 3 times more valuable. These items were being obtained from the south, and it was during this time that the Theban dynasty was actively looting and recycling valuables from the Valley of the Kings. This state-sponsored tomb robbing would be common practice throughout the remainder of the Third Intermediate Period. The history of the following kings of the 21st dynasty at Tanis are vague. King Simon enlarged the Temple of Amun at Tanis and supervised the rewrapping of a number of royal mummies later discovered in the Deir el-Bahari cache of 1881. The little light that is thrown on the 21st dynasty comes largely from the biblical record, since the period coincides with the struggle of David in Israel. An Egyptian campaign that seized Gezer from the weakened Philistines was recorded in the Old Testament. Solomon had succeeded his father David, and an Egyptian alliance was sealed by Solomon's marriage to an Egyptian princess. Egypt was now reversing the practice of diplomatic marriages by marrying out their daughters, something unheard of until now. The Theban priests of the 21st dynasty preserved another cache of royal mummies in the tomb of Amenhotep II. This explains how Susanes I came to be buried with the lid of Merneptah's sarcophagus. Merneptah's body had been moved to the tomb of Amenhotep II for safekeeping, but the huge sarcophagus was shipped north to Tanis. The end of the dynasty came with Susanes II, whose reign is little known. Often referred to as the Libyan dynasty, Manetho lists the kings as all being from Bubastis in the eastern delta. Shoshank I would inaugurate a series of kings who would rule Egypt for the next 200 years. Prior to his reign, Shoshank I had been commander-in-chief of the Egyptian army and chief advisor to his father-in-law. His rise to power was not wholly unexpected. During this time, Libyan mercenaries were used in Egypt as a police force. Shoshank himself was most likely the descendant of captives that Ramesses III had brought back to Egypt. They had reached the bank of the great river from one end to the other. They had taken possession of the cities in that region, but I destroyed them. I massacred all of them together. I forced them to go back across the frontiers of Egypt. I brought back the rest of some, great booty, spurring them on, gathering them like fowl before my horses. Their women and children by the thousand, their cattle by the millions. I enlisted their princes in my fortresses. I gave them chief archers and tribal chiefs. I made them into slaves, marked them with my name, their women and children likewise. The Libyan mercenaries gradually integrated into Egyptian society. As king, Shoshank I pursued an aggressive foreign policy in the Middle East. Known as Shishak of the Bible, Shoshank I defeated Judah in a highly successful campaign. According to biblical accounts, this began when Solomon's son Jeroboam fled from him and stayed with Shoshank I until Solomon died. Following the death of Solomon in 930 BC, the kingdom of Israel split and became greatly weakened. Shoshank I invaded Judah, mostly the area of Benjamin, during the 5th year of the reign of Rehoboam, taking with him most of the treasures of the temple built by Solomon. Egyptologist Kenneth Kitchen proposes that Shoshank I's successor, Asarkhan I, lavished 383 tons of gold and silver on Egyptian temples during the first 4 years of his reign and correlate it directly to this looting. Following his Judean victory, Shoshank I then marched to Megiddo, the scene of Thutmose III's victory 500 years before, where he erected a victory stele in the manner of his predecessors. He returned to Egypt and constructed a new court before the second pylon at Karnak, while documenting the campaign on its south outer wall. Soon after the triumphant Palestinian campaigns, Shoshank I died and was succeeded by his son, Asarkhan I. He married Ma'at-Kare, Susani II's daughter, thus forging another dynastic marriage line. He continued to provide strong patronage for the various leading priesthoods, thereby consolidating his position as well as maintaining a continuous building program, especially at his native city of Bubastis. Asurkan I's reign from 922 to 887 BC is known for many temple building projects and was a long and prosperous period of Egypt's history. His reign was peaceful and uneventful. However, both his son and grandson, Takhelat I and Asurkan II, later encountered difficulties controlling Thebes and Upper Egypt within their own reigns. Asurkan I was succeeded by Shashank II, who was the only ruler of the dynasty whose tomb was not plundered by tomb robbers. His burial was discovered within an antechamber of Susanes I's tomb at Tanis by Pierre Montet in 1939. Montet removed the coffin lid of Shashank II on March 20, 1939, in the presence of King Farouk of Egypt himself. It proved to contain many jewel-encrusted bracelets and pectorals, along with a beautiful hawk-headed silver coffin and a gold funerary mask. Takhelat I, who was a son of Asurkan I by a minor wife, succeeded Shashank II around 885 BC. This reign left no major monuments and observed the beginning of the fragmentation of Egypt once more into two power bases. At about 872 BC, Asurkan II succeeded his father, Takhelat I, as pharaoh. He was faced with the competing rule of his cousin, King Harsius, who controlled both Thebes and the western oasis in Egypt. Potentially, Harsius' kingship could have posed a serious challenge to the authority of Asurkan II. However, when Harsius died in 860 BC, Asurkan II acted to ensure that no one would replace him. Asurkan II consolidated his own position by appointing one of his sons, Nimlot, as high priest at Karnak, and another son, Shashank, as high priest of Ptah at Memphis. Asurkan thereby had two major priesthoods of Egypt in his family's grasp as a political move rather than from any religious motivation. Major building works were undertaken in the reign, especially at Bubastis, in the temple of the cat goddess Bastet. Other buildings in his name were constructed at Memphis, Tanis, Thebes, and Leontopolis, which was to become the capital of the succeeding dynasty. In the outside world, a growing menace was coming from Assyria, who turned her attention towards the Levant after taking over northern Mesopotamia and Syria. The Assyrian king Shalmaneser III continued his father Ashurnasirpal II's campaigns into Syria-Palestine in 853 BC. Egypt was forced to confront the threat by aligning with Israel and neighboring kingdoms, and together they halted the Assyrian advance at the Battle of Karkar on the Orontes. The exact details about this battle are unknown, and no information is available on the number of Egyptian forces involved. In 837 BC, Asurkan II was succeeded by Shashank III. He was not a son of Asurkan II, but instead a grandson through his dead father, Prince Takhelat. As he was only a grandson, his cousin Takhelat II contested his succession, and Egypt became divided with Takhelat II ruling from Thebes as the new 23rd dynasty, and Shashank continuing his rule of the 22nd dynasty from Tanis. The Theban high priest Asurkan, the future Asurkan III of the 23rd dynasty, did date his activities at Thebes and Upper Egypt to Shashank III's reign, but this was solely for administrative reasons. Shashank III outlived his first 5 sons and was thus succeeded by his 6th son, Shashank IV, who later died childless. Nothing is known of his reign. He was succeeded by Shashank III's 7th son, Pami. He ruled from 785 to 778 BC, but nothing noteworthy is known. Pami was succeeded by Shashank V. Despite having enjoyed one of the longest reigns of the entire dynasty, 38 years, and having left a fair amount of inscriptions, little is known about Shashank V's life. His realm underwent an unstoppable shrinking due to the progressive increase of independence of various tribal chiefs, princes, and concurrent kings. Shashank V died probably in 740 BC, Besides his father Pami, his family relationships are not entirely clear, but it is often assumed that his successor was Asurkan IV, who also may have been his son. Traditionally, Asurkan IV was considered the last king of the 22nd dynasty. He was de facto little more than ruler in Tanis and Bubastis in Lower Egypt. Asurkan IV ruled during one of the most chaotic and politically fragmented periods of ancient Egypt, in which the Nile Delta was dotted with small Libyan kingdoms and principalities and Meshwesh dominions. As the last heir of the Tanite rulers, he inherited the easternmost parts of these kingdoms, the area most involved in all the political and military upheavals that soon would afflict the Near East. Shortly after he came to power, Asurkan IV encountered the military campaign led by Pianki, the Kushite pharaoh of the Nubian 25th dynasty, along with other local rulers in Lower and Middle Egypt, including Nimlot of Hermopolis and Eput II of Leontopolis. Asurkan IV joined a coalition led by the chief of the West, Tefnakht, to resist the Nubian invasion. However, Pianki's forces proved unstoppable, and one by one the opposing leaders surrendered. To avoid a direct conflict, Asurkan IV decided to go to the Temple of Ra in Heliopolis and personally submit to Pianki, which was properly followed by other coalition members. Pianki, as documented in his victory stela, accepted their submission, but he did not permit Asurkan and most of the other rulers to enter the royal enclosure because they were uncircumcised and had eaten fish, which were considered abominations by the Nubians. Despite these restrictions, Asurkan IV and the others were allowed to maintain control over their respective regions and continue to exercise their authority. No mention of Asurkan IV is known after 716 BC. Some archaeological findings suggest that shortly after this date, Baccharis of the 24th dynasty may have expanded his realm eastward, supplanting Asurkan at Tanis. In 720 BC, Pianki's successor Shebeka marched northward and defeated Baccharis. This ended the 22nd dynasty. As we noted in the last section during the 22nd dynasty, in 837 BC, Asurkan II was succeeded by Shoshenq III. He was not a son of Asurkan II, but instead a grandson through his dead father, Prince Takalat. As he was only a grandson, his cousin Takalat II contested his succession, and Egypt became divided, with Takalat II ruling from Thebes as the new 23rd dynasty, and Shoshenq continuing his rule of the 22nd dynasty from Tanis. Takalat II maintained stability in the south, where his half-brother Nimlot was still in power at Thebes as high priest. All was well until Nimlot died 11 years later. Rebellions arose and had to be put down. The ringleaders in Thebes were caught and executed, their bodies burnt to ensure that there would be no hope for an afterlife. For the next 4 years, peace reigned, but in year 15 of Takalat II's reign, civil war once again struck the country, which would last for almost a decade. It was probably at this time that further incursions were made into the Valley of the Kings with official sanctions, with looters attacking the previous tombs of the Ramesside kings. When Takalat II died, he was buried at Tanis, where he would be found by Pierre Montet in a revised coffin in the antechamber of the tomb of Asurkan II. Pudabustis I proclaimed himself king and continued the 23rd dynasty. The rulers and timelines of this dynasty become all but clear. The relationships between the rulers of both these dynasties are even more vague. This 23rd dynasty consisted of a number of Meshwesh kings who ruled either as pharaohs or as independent kings of parts of Upper Egypt from 837 BC to 735 BC. Shoshenq VI succeeded Pudabustis I, but not for long, as the high priest Asurkan defeated him in battle and took the throne as Asurkan III. He installed his eldest son Takalot as both ruler of Heracleopolis and chief priest of Amun, diminishing the 22nd dynasty's influence in Thebes. After Asurkan III died, Takalot became the sole ruler, giving up his role as chief priest when he became Pharaoh Takalot III. His sister, Shepenwepet I, took over as chief priestess and divine adoratress of Amun, effectively governing Thebes alongside her brother. Takalot III relinquished control over Heracleopolis to Peft-Juowi-Bastet, who married a daughter of Rudamun, Takalot's brother. After Takalot III's death, Rudamun briefly succeeded him, but was soon replaced by Iput II, also known as Ini. Under his reign, the region became more fragmented as Peft-Juowi-Bastet and Nimlot, the governor of Hermopolis, took on royal titles. The reigns of Rudamun and Iput II marked the final phase of the 23rd dynasty in Thebes, ending when Pianki, king of Napata, put an end to the so-called Libyan anarchy. Tefnakht, the king of Sais in the Delta, attempted to stem the invasion by organizing a coalition of northern kings. He became the first king of only two kings of the 24th dynasty. The other was Bakanranef, better known in Greek myth as Baccharis, who tangled with Heracles. Tefnakht probably reigned for about 8 years and Bakanranef for 6. With the 23rd and 24th dynasties creating civil wars throughout the region and fragmenting the kingdom into separate monarchies, the time was ripe for invasion. Separate kings ruled from Heracleopolis, Tanis, Hermopolis, Thebes, Memphis, and Sais. The division made a unified defense of the country difficult, and the Nubians and Kush prepared to take over from the south. We follow the 25th dynasty, a time when Nubia ruled as Pharaohs of Egypt, in the next episode. Thank you for joining us.